Hey, it's Laura.
It's Amanda.
And
we are Moms on a Mission,
Mission.
where faith, motherhood, and purpose come together.
We're not just raising children, we're raising disciples, striving to make an eternal impact in our homes and beyond.
Here, we choose grace over guilt, progress over perfection, and God's truth over the world's noise.
Together, we'll encourage, uplift, and equip one another to walk boldly in our calling as mothers on a mission.
So, grab your coffee, take a deep breath, and let's dive into this journey of faith-filled motherhood, one step, one prayer, and one mission at a time. Welcome back
Good
to
morning.
Moms on a Mission, episode 11. What did you just call it?
Sticks.
Yeah. I like that.
We're at Sticks.
All right. You want to open us up with a prayer?
Sure. Lord, thank you for walking with us in every season, even the ones that don't make sense. Quiet our anxious thoughts today and remind us that your plan is better than anything that we could imagine. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. So today we are talking about I'm not where I thought I would be, especially at this age.
And finding God's peace in the now,
I like that.
which is, sometimes easier said than done.
Totally.
And we were just talking before we started recording that, yesterday I made a social media post about how it had been 10 years to the day that I had interviewed for and gone through the hiring process of what at the time was my dream job as a death investigation specialist, criminal investigations with the GBI.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this age now, if everything would have played out the way that I wanted it to play out a decade ago, I would be, a very successful criminal investigator right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about the farthest thing from what I do now.
Yes.
Short stint of a career in law enforcement at 5.5 years. And, Josh too, being in law enforcement, he actually had a 12-year run of law enforcement.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
12 years. And when we hung it all up, we pivoted, like we spoke about last week, and just went a completely different direction. But there are still some times where I think, still not where I want to be.
Yeah.
Do you feel that?
I totally feel that. I feel that a lot. So before, well, I guess right before college, I kind of thought like I was a corporate girl.
Yeah.
I was going to be in the city. I was going to be, working or creating. I've always wanted to have a business, but I kind of thought I'd be like all business.
Yeah.
And then I came to college and I met Matt, and Matt was he's a good old Southern boy. He wanted to have a family. He wanted to be close to his mama. He wanted to, he was a settle down kind of guy, even though you wouldn't know that when you met him in college.
And this was, where did you guys go to college?
We went to North Georgia Tech up here in Habersham.
Excellent.
That's where we met. And I just after, dating him and, kind of finding out he wanted to have a family and all that, and moving up here to the mountains. I'm from Gwinnett County. So
you and me both.
My thoughts were of having, the job or the big business or, it kind of fit right in there. And then when you move up here, it's like,
everything changes.
That's not, yeah, it's not the world up here in the mountains. And so he had, that was what he had wanted. And then it started to become my want and my desire. And so we got married, we had our first son, and, I still I just always thought, I was going to have this big career, this big business really. And I just never did. After I thought I would go back to work too. After I had my first baby, I thought, okay, I'll be at home for a while and then I'm going right back to work.
Sure.
And then I was like, no way.
Never mind. So what you said, you envisioned this corporate job. What exactly did you plan on doing, or did you strive to do or think that you would be? Anything in particular?
Well, the plan was to go really at the end of high school. I had applied and got accepted to a school in California for photography and cinematography.
Oh, cool.
And um, it was in Santa Barbara. And when it came down to it, my mom was like crushed. I was going to be on the other side of the country and we were going to make it happen, but the cost of it was really extreme. And it was going to put her in a really bad position. And when we finally, I got the acceptance and we're kind of going through it all, I was like, I can't do this to her.
Yeah.
I just can't do this. This is not, there's photography schools and everything so much closer. So I started looking into some things and I thought, you know what? I just need to, maybe I should take this on myself a little bit more, And so I thought, well, I'll start at North Georgia Tech and then go from there and see what happens. Cause they had a photography program. They still do a really great photography program out there. Video wasn't as huge at that point.
Right. No, that's kind of been a more evolving thing over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's where the plan was to start there. And then, and I did, I started there. They weren't even accredited at the time. So you couldn't even get an associate's there, but I went through their photography program. I got the certificate, but then, it's a 2-year thing. And from there I was kind of like, well, when I moved up here from Gwinnett to go to college, I had already bought a house. That was how I got, to live here instead of like doing dorm life and everything else. I went ahead and bought a house and got a ton of roommates.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I owned a house up here. I had met Matt. So my vision changed.
Sure.
So, and then, it was like, well, he's from Douglasville, kind of, very right outside of Atlanta.
Yeah.
I was Gwinnett and we're like, well, now what?
How about Habersham?
Yeah. I was like, you going back to Douglasville? He's like, no.
No.
You going back to Gwinnett? I'm like, no.
Not if I don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I already owned the house. So we stayed up here. We both had been working since we moved up here. So we stayed at our jobs. He had ended up getting another more career job. And we just, actually in his field that he had studied too. He got a job right out of college in the field of study at the time. So we stayed and we stayed up here. We started, we got married, we started our family. And now, you have to drag our cold, dead bodies out of here to get us out.
Absolutely. I'm not going anywhere. This is home now. And like you, I am from Gwinnett. And if I'd have had it my way when I graduated from high school, I'd have gone somewhere and played softball. And I really aspired to be a veterinarian.
Oh, really?
I did. And ironically, now one of my closest friends, she has just completed her second year of vet school at UGA.
Awesome.
She's officially halfway done.
Woohoo.
So I'm just kind of living vicariously through her, watching her walk it. And that didn't happen. I went to Georgia State.
Mm-hmm.
I earned my bachelor's degree. It's a bachelor's of science in criminal justice. And I have a double minor in psychology and sociology. And I knew that I wanted to go either the law school route or the criminal investigations route.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to do my internship my senior year with the Gwinnett District Attorney's Office.
Oh, nice.
And had a blast.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. I got to work alongside some criminal investigators. I got to observe court in a few different manners that the public didn't necessarily get to see court.
Right.
And so that was really cool to me. And I thought from assisting with case files and shadowing the various investigators in the office that this is what I want to do.
Right.
Little did I know at the time that these gentlemen had already, ladies and gentlemen, I should say, I shadowed primarily 3 males.
Mm-hmm.
They had already worked careers of being a police officer with local law enforcement agencies and worked on the road. I didn't realize that they had done all this to get to the position that they were currently in.
Oh,
I thought it was more of a seamless, from one to the other.
right.
And so they told me, you'll have to go get some law enforcement work under your belt, and then
Oh,
you can apply to be an investigator. And I thought, well, I don't really want to work on the road and do that aspect of law enforcement.
right.
I want to do the behind the desk stuff. And they were like, that's not how it works.
Ah,
So I actually had an opportunity to go to work in the solicitor's office upon completion and graduation, but the hiring freeze took place 3 days before my start date.
oh my word.
So then I was jobless.
Mm-hmm.
I was a graduate, but now I was jobless because I had already turned in my resignation to the retail store that I had been working at through college, the PGA Superstore. So I worked in a golf and tennis industry,
Right.
and turned in that resignation because I was going to work in the solicitor's office.
Right. Oh my word.
Hiring freeze hits. So I go back to them and I'm like, well, that fell through very last minute. So they let me come back on. And I applied to the sheriff's department in Gwinnett, which at the time was a very tedious process and a lengthy process. It was, it was well known that it was going to be a minimum of like 6 months
Oh, wow.
to get through the process start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
They had really high standards, and they had a multi-step process that included a physical assessment, a mental assessment that you had to do. You had to take tests, and you had to interview, and it was just, it was hard.
Yeah.
And at the time, even if you worked at another agency, you had to go through the entire process of theirs to get hired on.
Oh, wow.
There was no lateral transferring. And the police department was the same way. Now and for years now, with the staff shortage that they have, they're taking lateral transfers left and right. They're, offering hiring bonuses
Yeah.
and incentives to move here and join the force. That was not a thing when we worked there.
Yeah.
It was very hard to get through the process. So needless to say, I started the process, and it took me every bit of 6 or 7 months to get through it. And I officially got hired in December of 2009. I met Josh while I was in orientation, and of course the rest is history.
Yeah.
But I really did think that we were both going to have this, long and successful career in law enforcement, and then retire up here.
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of our game plan. Well, things changed, and we shifted because we were to the point where we were miserable in our jobs. We didn't necessarily enjoy going to work and doing the job anymore, but it was almost like some of the people and the politics just made it unbearable.
Yeah.
And we had talked beforehand about what a backup plan was, and Josh's was always, I'm going to get my real estate license because my dad's a general contractor and I've watched him build houses my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to get my license, and I'm going to put that in my back pocket, and I'm going to hang on to it.
Right.
So he did. And he encouraged me to do the same. And I thought, I don't know anything about real estate.
Yeah.
But I went and got my license as well. And so once we both had it and we both felt comfortable, he was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm out. I don't have the passion for it.
Right.
And so we left and jumped into real estate with both feet, really with no backup plan and no looking back. And I've enjoyed every bit of it, the flexibility that it's brought me to do things with my kids, at school and through the summer and stuff has been wonderful, because these are things that I would have strived for my entire law enforcement career.
Right.
To have, weekends and holidays off and extended time with my family where I could just go and do as I pleased. So I'm thankful for that. But if you'd have told me, a decade ago that this is where I would be, I'd have said, no way.
Yeah.
That's not it.
I know that's how I feel too. But I'm still I'm a little bit in the middle of it still because after I have worked, I've done so many things. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none.
No, that's not true. You've done so many great things.
I've done a lot of things. And after my first son was born, I was like, we got to have some income. We've got to have a little bit more income. So I started doing everything. I mean, I have sold makeup. I started baking for a couple of like local restaurants. I was doing that, and that actually was bringing a little bit of income for me while he was really little, like baby. But I mean, I was delivering those, cakes and all that kind of stuff. Baking's very time consuming. I wasn't doing it in a kitchen that I should have been doing it in.
Right.
And so, we kind of got to a point where it was like, okay, you're either going to have to pivot and do this the right way or stop. And I just wasn't making enough money to make it worth doing it, getting like the commercial kitchen type of a thing going. So I stopped doing that. But there was just, it's always been kind of one thing after another. We had our second son, but, I've always done something to have a little bit of income. I cleaned houses for a while. And then it kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, I kind of went on a financial journey at that point too. I'm like, how? I mean, we're living paycheck to paycheck, no matter how much money we make. It's still living paycheck to paycheck. And so I was kind of like, I got to figure this out. I got to figure out how are people doing this better than I am? So I started on this financial journey of learning about money, investing, all of it. And from there, I was like, if you look up what do the wealthiest people in the world do? What did they do? Real estate.
Real estate.
And so that's how I got into real estate. I was like, okay, I'm going to do real estate.
And have you ever read that? Is it
Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
I've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's a great book.
But so I have a book journey like all other real estate investors.
Yep.
My book journey started with the 4-hour work week.
Okay. Yep.
Then I went to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And from there, as you say, the rest is history.
Yeah.
Like there's all these same core books that so many of us have read. And I am totally one of those people. I had like my, like The Simple Path to Wealth. There's like a tax strategy book. And then of course, Bigger Pockets comes on the scene.
Yep. And there's, what is the number? Cause I don't remember how many streams of income does the average millionaire?
7.
7. Okay. I thought it was 7, 5 or 7.
That's biblical. Did you know that?
It is biblical. You're exactly right.
I had no idea that was biblical until really digging deep into the whole money, learning about money. Did this inspire Wealthy Kids Academy? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That was kind of later. I came to Matt one day and I was like, okay, I am going to, this is my plan. And that Instagram video that's like, I'm very passionate about this. I've had this passion since lunch and I'm going to do it.
Yes.
That was like, that's me. It's probably still me.
Maybe in a sense. But this has been an ongoing project for how long now?
I've had my license for about 5 years now.
Fabulous.
So I got my license, but I had gone to Matt and I was like, okay, it's either fitness instructor or real estate license. And he was like, what? Fitness instructor? I was like, I like fitness. He's like, really? When is the last time you worked out? I was like, that's beside the point. I mean, I enjoy working out. He's like, I think you should go with real estate.
Thanks. I can read the writing on the wall, Matt.
I was like, all right. Okay, fine.
Real estate it is.
He's like, fitness instructors, they're like 5 a.m. workout folks. Like I just don't really, I don't know how you would do
going that route.
So I was like, okay, all right, I'll get the license. So I got the license really thinking, okay, I'm going to be a real estate investor. Because if you look at that stuff, when you're not in the middle of it, they tell you like, you can do it. OPM, use other people's money and all this stuff, which is a real thing. But when you're getting started, it's not really super realistic unless you are super bold and brazen and just have the guts to go out and, jump in with both feet. And I did not. And so I kind of floated over into the agent side of things. That was right. I mean, I was poised beautifully for a high dollar career because that was right when everything started to go crazy
with the market
prior. Yeah. Like right before COVID.
Yep.
And then during COVID. Well, I was actually given an offer to work on a team of an amazing, super successful team. And they were really getting their ball rolling at the time. And I was like, oh, I would love to. And they were like, okay, it's an in-office job and it's full-time. And I had one baby on my hip and I had one in tow. And I was like, okay, can I do office stuff from home? Because I still have one. He's not even in preschool yet. I mean, he's still like on my hip. He was like 2.
Little guy.
And they were like, not really. You probably need to get some folks to help you out because this is truly a full-time position that we're looking for. And I was like, I totally respect that. I can't do it. And so that moment in time for me is always one that I question. Did I do the right thing? Because that team is unbelievably successful. And they do a lot of things in real estate that I've always wanted to do. They do, they have a lot of investment type, people that they work with. They have a large team of people that work with them. I mean, I just admire the heck out of them. And I still kind of think, was that the right thing? But at the time, I just could not. I just was like, no, I can't do it. And so, that was kind of where, for my personal story, is kind of where this whole subject matter came up because I still kind of struggle sometimes. I'm like, if I would have just grinded hard for like 3 to 3, 4, 5 years, maybe I'd be in a totally different place, financially. So I don't know. I still kind of look back, but at the same time, it's like, but my boys, they are like, we're still super close. I got to be there for both kids, like all the moments. So
no,
I don't know.
I think without a doubt, you made the right call. Because I'm familiar with what you have done and accomplished over the last several years on your own, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. You should be very proud.
Thank you.
And so I think it's easy for me to sit here and say that I think that you made the right call. I also would like to say that being in the real estate world, that is what kept Josh and I from doing certain things as well, was the time that was required in office by either different brokers or, the office in particular, when they would say, they require X number of hours in your office per week.
Right.
And we were like, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
We don't want to go that route. We are perfectly fine with having the pressure on ourselves to perform without feeling micromanaged.
Yeah.
And I think some of that too was coming out of law enforcement and having a chain of command over you for everything that you had to do. And so when we got to step back and be our own boss and not have to answer to anybody or be responsible for time in the office, it was like, well, I'm not wasting my time, just twiddling my thumbs because I'm responsible for making ends meet.
Right.
I just don't necessarily want to do it your way.
Right.
I want to go out and, prospect or whatever, hang door flyers, just something out of the office, because this will come as no shock to you. I have always said that once I got out of law enforcement, because obviously a uniform was required, once I got out of law enforcement, if I couldn't do it wearing sweatpants, I wasn't interested in that job.
Yeah.
And so I can do real estate from the comfort of my bed if I want to.
Yep.
And
for the most part, we have to show property occasionally, but for the most part.
And this is funny because one lady, I showed up in blue jeans, tennis shoes, and a t-shirt, you know, like I always am in. And she said, she was an older lady, and we were going to list her house. And she said, well, you don't look very fancy. And I said, well, ma'am, with all due respect, you know, I don't have to look fancy to sell your house.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to sell itself.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the time the market was booming. So 24 hours later, you know, here we are with 6 or 8 offers spread across her dining room table with, you know, which one we were going to discuss and ultimately take. And she was so sweet. And she looked at me and she said, I guess you was right. It didn't take fancy. I said, no, ma'am, it didn't. Which I just love. But from a biblical perspective, you and I both referenced Proverbs 16:9 before we started this.
Yeah.
In saying that in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps.
Yes.
Which I think just hits home in this whole subject matter.
So on the way up here, I heard that song Flowers.
Oh, yes.
And this is exactly what they're talking about. There's like in the song, there's a female and male, and they both sing the verse, but it's like they're saying this prayer, God, why are you keeping me here? And he says, I'm planting seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, he in the rain, he's using the watering can. And then they talk about, you know, later on, they look down in this beautiful valley of flowers and they are saying a grateful prayer. And I'm like, yes, I mean, totally. Because so that even came to a little bit of fruition for me. I was in a real estate meeting the other day, again, with this team that I just totally just super admire. And they were talking about kind of how they were like the teachers of the meeting. And they were talking about how they built their business. And somebody had asked them, you know, about their success and all. And they were like, listen, you know, we are very well connected. And that makes a huge difference in business and in real estate. You know, there was other family businesses and all these things. And I was like, it kind of hit me right then that I was like, you know, 5 years ago, I was not very well connected. I mean, I knew people, but I didn't know the people that I know now, the number of people. They never, you know, I had been taking care of my kids prior to that and working out of my house. And so now, you know, I'm a big part of the chamber. I do way more at our church than I had when my kids were teeny tiny. I have, you know, done different things with different types of business. I got into real estate and I thought, you know what? I have spent the last 5 years building my own connections.
Mm-hmm.
And now I could make you a list, probably a good number of people that, you know, that I could immediately call and say, hey, you know, want to do a deal or want to invest together or, you know, something like that. And I could not have done that 5 years ago. And I thought, well,
look at what I've been doing behind the scenes, you know, all this time. Anyways.
And I just was like, yeah, I have been working on these things, you know, and all these things God's been doing the work that I didn't even realize over this amount of time. And so that really did kind of hit me. It was like I've really all the time, I feel like God is like, you're right where I want you to be. You're right where I want you to be. I mean, I say that all the time, but it's hard to really, you know, like take that in and, you know, you start to second guess yourself. You're like, is that really just my own voice or am I really hearing from God? You know? So, yeah, that verse, I love that Proverbs 16:9. That one is a good one because we can plan all we want to. And sometimes I think God laughs at our plans.
Yes, I'm sure most people listening have heard if you want to make God laugh, you tell him your plans.
Yes.
Yeah. But you're exactly right. And you are a great example of like the story you just gave. The day you plant the fruit is not the day that you eat the fruit.
Mm-mm.
You
That's
know,
true.
It's a process.
It is.
It's definitely a process. And don't forget that Moses didn't start leading Israel until he was 80.
Yeah.
So
God didn't start his ministry until he was 30. 30?
30.
Okay.
30. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not too late.
No, it's definitely not. And part of something else had kind of happened to me a few weeks back, and it seemed like it kind of happened like multiple times within just a few weeks. I had gone out and seen one of my friends, and she was working at her job. And when I came in and we were talking a little bit, she was like, "You probably think I'm silly for working here." And I was like, "What?"
Did she feel embarrassed?
Well, and I said, what do you mean?" And she was like, "Well, I know this is kind of a young person job, but I really do love it." I was like,
Then what does it matter?
I was like, first of all, I never had that thought.
No.
But also, first of all, you are helping provide. Whether no matter what kind of job it is, you're making money.
Yeah.
So, and I don't make money every day. You come in here and make money every day. I don't make money every day because that's not how my job works.
Right.
So today you made more money than I did, A.
And are you happy?
Yes. And B, it was like, why? Who cares?
Yeah.
Like you are doing your thing and it suits you. Absolutely. You do whatever you want to do. And again, I had seen that had happened to me before when I had seen somebody I knew and she was working at a restaurant and she was like, I know this is not typically where you would, see somebody my age working. I'm like, what?
So
Why?
what?
And I kind of feel that way, too. Sometimes I think now I love the restaurant business. When I was in college, I worked in a restaurant and I've always thought, you know what? I could go back and do that any day of the week.
And let me just sidebar here. You know a couple of my very favorite recipes from working in the restaurant industry.
Yes. Yes. So, and that was, I learned so much there. I learned how to cook. I learned how to serve. I learned hospitality. I learned about food. I learned about service. I learned about wine. Then I even got a job in the wine industry from working in a restaurant. I learned about cocktails and bartending. I learned so much when I worked there and I loved that job.
I think a restaurant is a stepping stone to so many other things.
Absolutely. And that I was actually trying to tell one of our we're trying to get this flex program off the ground at the high school where it's an entrepreneurship program through the state. I'm sorry, it's not through the state. It's a statewide program that kids can participate in, and it's an entrepreneurship program. Well, we have brought it to Habersham now, thanks to the chamber. And so we went and pitched it at the high school to some of the students a couple weeks ago. And I was talking to one of the girls and she's like, yeah, I work at a local restaurant and, I really just don't know what I want to do. I'm like, you have no idea how much you're learning there.
Yeah.
It's like there are hospitality jobs. You can go into, like hotel management. You can travel with that kind of stuff. You can go in, on cruise ships and work travel jobs if you want. You can stay in business and, restaurant ownership, management. There's so much.
Kind of like the options are endless in a restaurant. Now, I've never personally, I say that. Not as an adult. When I was 18, I worked in a pizza restaurant. Mm-hmm. For just a couple months.
That's where I started in the restaurant business.
Is it?
14 years old at Pepperoni's in Duluth.
Okay. So I worked at a Johnny's Pizza in Lawrenceville.
Okay.
And that was like my first real like clock in, clock out job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I didn't love it, but it was just something to kind of get my feet wet and introduce me into the working world.
Right.
And I, like you, gained a lot of respect for people that did that and that even made a career out of it because I just didn't enjoy it.
Right.
I learned a lot. I just didn't love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and from there too, there's like franchise opportunities.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember one time in college at North Georgia Tech, this entrepreneur came in and he spoke to our class and he was an owner of a franchise. And he was telling us, as kids, he's like, you have no idea, if you work in some of these franchises, and that's your plan, that's your goal, is to own one. At the end, they will set you up. They will get you where you need to go. They will help you. And me, being a stupid teenager, totally blew that off.
Just dismissed it.
Totally. Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to own a franchise. Like that was, do you know those things? I mean, you can have huge success with those. And yeah, I totally blew that off. I had no idea how wealthy those can make a family, how much difference they can make, anyway. And there again, but that all ties back to this like whole judgment thing of, well, what am I doing at this age and what are other people thinking of it? And talking about the restaurant business, I have always thought I could go back and do that in a heartbeat.
At any age.
And then my ego thinks, yeah, but what would people think if they saw you in a restaurant and you were serving their table at almost 40, and I don't know. And I really shouldn't care.
No, I wouldn't care at all. I wouldn't think anything like you when your friend walked in or when you walked into your friend's business and it sounded like you were saying that she was almost like embarrassed or ashamed to have been seen in there.
Yeah, she was. And I had never thought of that.
That wouldn't have crossed my mind.
No, it didn't. It didn't cross my mind either.
It wouldn't cross my mind to see you waiting a table if I walked into a restaurant right now. Like, that's just not something that I would think, like, you're too old to be doing this.
Right.
You're too intelligent or seasoned or established in various other careers, like that you shouldn't be here, because that is super judgmental and rude. And I don't think of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean,
so many of us do.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially, again, we're our own worst enemies when it comes to stuff like that. And, we can kind of beat ourselves up over that. And it's really, I don't think that everybody, does judge that way. And if they do, then, hey, it just is what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that, you're doing you're making money every day. You're helping to provide, you're doing something you like more than likely. So yeah, I love kind of airing that out because I think it's a thing. And especially right now when finances are tight for everybody, no matter how much money you're making, there are things that you're like, oh, that's gotten expensive.
Yes, absolutely.
And so if there's some time where you're like, you know what, I'm going to go wait some tables, or I'm going to go work at this job that, maybe I think is silly, or, or something like that. If it's helping and you can do it and it makes sense for you, just who cares?
Yeah,
just go do it.
What?
Go do it.
I think the other caveat to all this too is, aside from just jobs, as women, and I'm sure there are many that experience the fact that, oh, you're a certain age and you're not engaged.
Oh,
you're a certain age and not married. You're a certain age and you don't have kids yet.
Yeah.
And those are things that, and I've got close friends that have experienced infertility.
Mm-hmm.
I've lost 2 children myself. And it's those things that you hear that are like, oh, when are you guys going to start your family? Not knowing on the backside what's already transpired behind closed doors.
Right.
Why do we feel so comfortable asking people such personal questions?
Right.
Especially when the vast majority of us have experienced it in one way or another.
Yeah.
And I think that society really ties milestones to age.
Yes.
Like, oh my goodness, if you are a young man and you're not married and settled down with kids by 30, then, what's wrong, or
right.
why not? Mm-hmm. Or, does he have commitment issues?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's so prevalent. And again, it's it's totally unnecessary. It's not anybody's business. But why do we feel this way?
Well, not only that, but from the other side of the fence, if I see somebody who is single or they don't have kids or things like that, I think, man, they've got some opportunity there.
Yes.
I mean, not that, I'm not thinking, oh, I wish I was single. It's not that, but there's so much responsibilities and having different people and things that need you come along with, with marriage and with children and all that kind of stuff. And if that hasn't happened or it's, hasn't been a part of your story, use that time.
Absolutely.
Like, and same for even young people, like right out of school and things like that, maybe they feel like they should be, headed straight to college or, all of these things. It's like, no, if that didn't work out, if, just use that time for something else. Like,
Travel.
There's these beautiful stories of families who, they couldn't have their own children, but they have made an enormous difference in other people's lives with maybe they fostered, maybe they adopted, maybe they could be there for other family members who did have kids that, needed help. There's so many opportunities that, like you said, from your own side, you feel like people are judging. But then from, there's this whole other perspective of like, you got some wide open space and opportunity there. Use it, take it, like
absolutely.
Enjoy it, revel in it.
And there's nothing wrong with where you're at.
Mm-mm.
And I think sometimes we get stuck in these, again, milestones and ages.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I haven't accomplished something by a certain age, I've lost out.
Well,
I'm a failure.
There's like so much too that tied with age that I feel like people are like, okay, so a perfect example at the church, we had a graduation like celebration, and there were people of all ages up there.
Yes,
for
there were.
College graduation. And I admire the heck out of that because there is a lot of fear around for people to like go back to school if they're not, in their 20s or whatever. Do you know, I read a story one time about a man that was 75 years old and he got his law degree.
That's amazing.
Oh my gosh. I admire that so much. Somebody, a couple of years ago, I bumped into like a friend from like the past. He was one of my friend's dads actually. And he was like, listen, it's great to see you. I would love to stay here and talk more, but I am supposed to meet one of my buddies. He's 94 and I'm teaching him how to play the guitar.
Oh, wow. That's
like,
incredible.
Oh, like I am a big believer, like you are only as old as you allow yourself to feel.
Yep.
And that kind of stuff, like lifelong learning, still accomplishing the things that you've always wanted to do, learning new stuff, like who cares how old you are? Just do it.
When I was in college downtown at Georgia State, one of the classes that I took, it was one of the smaller ones. Like maybe there might have been like 35 or 40 of us in there, which was significantly smaller than some of the auditorium classes that had like 150 of us in there. So this being one of the smaller ones, the gentleman that taught it, he was the coroner for Henry County, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And he went around and had all of us introduce ourselves and tell, how old we were, like what year in school we were, what degree we were earning, or, path that we were taking. And there was one gentleman that was, I want to say he was in his 60s or 70s.
Yes.
And he was like, I'm just here because I'm bored at home. And,
I love it.
I looked it up online and this sounded like an interesting course. And then I realized that it was being taught by a coroner. So I signed up for it. And I was like, heck
I love that.
Why not?
Yes. Yep. I love that. I think that is so awesome. I admire that. I think that is the kind of perspective that we should all take. Who cares? Okay, here we are at Ecclesiastes 3:1. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. And there's like a little note under that verse that I have, and it says, we should remember that God is not late and that we are not lost. We are in a season and it has its purpose. Again, he's planting those seeds.
Yes. And to stay in Ecclesiastes, I have jotted down Ecclesiastes 3:11. He has made everything beautiful in its time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want people to remember that it is not failure when our plans shift. It's just divine redirection.
Yeah.
And I really, really just want anyone that's listening this to know that you are where you're supposed to be. These ages, these labels, these things that you've yet to accomplish, it's not too late.
Yeah.
Keep them on your list of things to do.
Yep.
Keep striving towards them.
Yeah.
Don't write them off just because you've hit 30.
Well, and I'll tell you too, Jordan Peterson is about to come out with a parenting series on Daily Wire, and I am super excited to listen to it. I watched the trailer yesterday, and he was like, parenting and having young kids is such a short season in your life. Don't miss it.
Yeah, don't rush it.
And he was talking to these people, I guess he was like counseling or whatever, and he was saying that they were like, we have to do things sometimes. Like we have to be places. And, I guess the kid was having disciplinary problems or whatever. And they're like, how do we deal with that when we need to leave? And he was like, you have to stop.
Yeah.
You have to deal with this. Take 10 minutes out of your day and make it better. The other stuff, it can wait.
Yep.
I was like, oh, like
Speaking
right in the chest,
to
Jordan.
me, yeah. Right to me, because, and I think you can resonate with this, guilt often comes from looking backwards, but grace is found when we look upwards. And your worth is not measured by your productivity or your timeline. And every time that you say, I should have, we should really redirect that with God still can.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I like that. Psalm 37 is on my notes. Psalm 37:23, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way.
Ooh, yes.
So it's not always easy. It's not always something that we're like, there'll be time for that. But truly, God has us right where he wants us.
Yep. Where you are right now is not a detour. It's actually part of your story. God sees it all. And Mama, he's not disappointed in you. He's developing you.
Ooh, love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right, shall we wrap this one up?
Yep, let's wrap it up.
All right. Don't forget that we have one of the most amazing producers with Stay Stoked Creative Co. And that is why we get to come to you every week and talk with you about all of these amazing topics. So if you would like to know more about Stay Stoked Creative Co., you can find information about that in the show notes. And we would love it if you would follow along with our newsletter with Wealthy Kids Academy. And you can find that link in the show notes below as well.
Thanks for listening. Be blessed.
Amen. See you next time.
Bye.